you've been doing some really deep coverage of the Palestine situation, the onslaught committed by Israel. I'm just going to play a few clips now because there has been a recent vote on an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. And surprise, surprise, the United States has rejected it. So here's the vote that Al Jazeera covered.
I will now submit to the vote the draft resolution. Those in favor of the draft resolution in document S/2023/970, raise your hand.
En contra.
Against.
So there you have the United States as a singular country that vetoed the humanitarian ceasefire, which was voted upon because Israel, after the very short-lived truce, has been going on a rampage. But one last clip, Richard, if you don't mind. You posted this actually, and I think it's important to note that not only did the United States vote against this, but here's the disrespect when the envoy, the Palestinian envoy, began speaking. So here we go.
I now resume my role as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, this is the moment of truth. This is a turning point in history, and it is beyond regrettable. It is disastrous that the Security Council was again prevented from rising to this moment.
So we don't have to go further. As you can see, he is playing with this phone, and that is on top of the vote. But Rich, yeah, I'm just going to kick it to you there to go wherever you want to go in terms of what's going on right now.
He doesn't even bother listening for 10 seconds, not even no eye contact, nothing, you know. And remember that the U.S. is you know, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, so it's a 15-member body. It's one of the organs of the United Nations, and 10 of the 15 members rotate. You know, so right now Ecuador has the presidency. It might be someone else next term. And, you know, the victors of World War II, so China, Russia, the UK, US, France, they have these permanent seats. Now, I think this was a big mistake because the whole point of the UN is to have a democracy of nations to secure world peace. And this undermines it. And it doesn't matter that, you know, you have China and Russia who also have that veto power. I think it shouldn't come into play because it undermines the whole process, as we've just seen. And I've always said that Israel has 3 seats on the UN Security Council, you know, especially the US, UK, and France. But this is one of the reasons why the Israeli lobby the United States so much, because they want to have a seat for themselves on the UN Security Council. And I should just point something out, because UN Security Council resolutions are legally binding. You have to enforce them. They are legally binding. It's not like some symbolic thing. You have to go through with it. And even what's staggering here is that even if they had passed it, nothing would happen, right? Because the problem with the UN is that they'll say things that are correct, like UN Resolution 242, which was passed by the Security Council, which says Israel has to leave you know, all the territories that it invaded in 1967. So these are the Syrian Golan Heights, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, which is occupying to this day, like as I'm speaking to you, you know, 60 years later. So it refuses to abide by these resolutions. And that's just one of them. There's also in 1980 and 1981, the UN Security Council resolutions that basically declared that Israel's annexation of Jerusalem and the Golan Heights in Syria are illegal. They're null and void. They have no validity. Israel just ignores them and does whatever it wants. So, you know, even if this had passed, Israel would not abide by these resolutions. And I find this hysterical and so funny, because Israel derives its legitimacy from the UN. It says we are a real country and not a colony because we are a UN member state. okay, well, you have to follow through what the UN tells you then, because you signed up to this organization, and these Security Council resolutions are legally binding. So when Israel wants, it loves the UN. It always points to the partition plan, which is UNGA 181. And then when it doesn't, when it doesn't suit them, they just ignore the UN, and they call, they have the goal to come in and call the Secretary General anti-Semitic. I mean, and tell him to resign. I mean, this has never happened before. Like no one has come in there and told the Secretary General to resign. This is so insulting. And also this act where, one day the ambassador, he brings a brick, and then, he starts wearing these yellow stars that were, from the Holocaust, where they would put them on Jews to identify them and shame them and humiliate them. And he's acting like he's a Holocaust victim. Right now, just because the UN member states are calling out Israel's genocide in Gaza. Well, yeah, they're calling it out because it is genocide. It's a Holocaust. People are being burned, decapitated, starved to death. It's horrific. So, just because Israel has some of its citizens that suffered in the Holocaust, or relatives suffered in the Holocaust, that doesn't give it a license to carry out a Holocaust. And the thing is that it's not just that Israel spits on the UN. It's literally murdering the UN workers. I mean, I'm going to remind you that you have over 130 UN workers that have been killed since October 7th. Israel killed them all. Hamas don't kill UN workers. They just don't. That's not a thing. Israel does. It's shelled UN positions in Lebanon, harassed UN in Syria. This is a constant thing. They've been doing this for decades. They just don't care. They really don't care. And they've even, as you know, they even shot at a U.S. ship, the USS Liberty. They attacked the King David Hotel. So Israel has no problem even killing U.S. troops and British troops, and then asking for money and cover in the media from those countries at the same time, which is incredible. So, there are no limits for the Israelis. They will murder anyone, medics, journalists, UN workers, and then even call them Hamas members, which literally means nothing, because even if they were, let's play devil's advocate literally for a second and say that they are, which they're not. That doesn't mean anything. You can't just execute someone because they're in Hamas. Hamas is a political party like any other. That's like saying, well, I can execute anyone who's a member of the Democrats. I mean, this is their logic. So they have no right being in Gaza, which again, they under the UN, under international law, they are considered to be occupying. Remember this, Israel is legally considered an occupier in Gaza and in Jerusalem and in the West Bank and in Syria. So any action that you take as a Palestinian or a Syrian against Israel is legal. You can throw a donut, you can throw an RPG, it doesn't matter. Those troops are illegally occupying your country. You have a right to resist. So the Israelis, they say they left in 2005, but they never left. They've besieged Gaza. There was a year of difference where they besieged Gaza, and they've forced Egypt's hand to help them, of course, which again, no one in Egypt is okay with. It's just you have a few people at the top that play ball because they need U.S. aid, they need food. Egypt has the largest Arab population, so they depend on U.S. aid. So, there's a lot going on here. And it's incredible that Israel is even allowed to be in the UN, because the partition plan, which they love pointing to, it says that if Israel is a country, well, then there has to be a Palestinian state. And also Jerusalem has to be a separate body, or corpus separatum in Latin. Legally means that it doesn't belong to anyone. It would be a special city, because it's special for Jews, for Muslims, for Christians. And so Israel has defied both those conditions. They have stood in the way of a Palestinian state materializing, and they have illegally occupied Jerusalem since '67. So, technically speaking, not just morally but legally, Israel doesn't have the right to be in the UN as long as Palestine isn't a UN member, and as long as Jerusalem is occupied.
Yeah, and one of the huge errors in history, and of course, the United States had a big role to play in this, was, of course, allowing Israel's, United Nations recognition while there was no equal, if there could be an equal, given that Israel's whole formation is based on the brutalization and oppression of Palestinians, but no equal Palestinian state, no actual two-state solution, which the UN continues to go on and on about, but it really has not found any kind of traction.
Let me just add something, Danny. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to add something about this two-state solution. Like the fact that Palestinians have even entertained the thought of this is already a gesture of goodwill, because who said they have to carve up half their country in the first place? Who said they have to agree with this? So we are already being very generous by even mentioning the partition plan. You know, if somebody comes into your house and says, give me half the house, you're under no obligation to give them the damn house. Okay, so it's been taken by force. And then, you know, making it a UN member state is an afterthought. But you had these Zionist militias, what would be terrorist groups, and were classified in the UK as terrorist groups, like Haganah, the Leahy and Stern gang, which make up the Israeli army today. Literally, they became the Israeli army. They were formed, morphed as one. So these terrorist groups were already, harassing Arabs, killing British officers, killing Jews who were anti-Zionists like 100 years ago. They were coming from Europe in waves and emigrating there. And so I just want to say with the two-state solution that it's already generous for the Palestinians to even consider this. And even then, it's not good enough for the Israelis, right? It's just not good enough. And we know that the Oslo Accords were signed. That's a fact. They were signed. Palestine recognized Israel, and Israel was supposed to help them make a Palestinian state within 5 years. That never happened. So, the Palestinians are under no obligation to sustain an Israeli state, and neither is Syria and neither is Lebanon, because we should remember that in order for Israel to exist, it occupies 3 countries. Well, I say that because of the Holocaust, they should ask for reparations from the Europeans that murdered them, right? Because Israel calls itself the Jewish state, and they should take those reparations and ask for land from the Europeans. Why should they take it from Arabs? Arabs have nothing to do with this. So, yeah.
Yeah, and many observers, I would say astute observers, have pointed out that this operation or genocide in Gaza is part and parcel of the complete eradication of any kind of Palestinian state whatsoever. It's an attempt to literally erase Palestinians, and the numbers are staggering. I think there's at least official count, 17,000+ killed, half of those children, nearly half of those women, and there's many thousands under rubble, which, if we count those up, likely a majority of those will not survive, and that means we have over 20,000. So the numbers are staggering, but it's so interesting to see, Richard. You posted this. Definitely want to play it from John Kirby, of course, the spokesperson of the administration, Biden administration. He had this to say: they're getting really defensive now because, on the one hand, they're vetoing humanitarian ceasefires, and on the other hand, they're saying things like this
about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Name me one more nation, any other nation, that's doing as much as the United States to alleviate the pain and suffering of the people of Gaza. You can't. You just can't. The United States, through President Biden, is leading the effort to get trucks, food, water, medicine, and fuel into the people of Gaza. Wait. Name another nation that's doing as more than the United States to get hostages out or to get people, foreign nationals, out of Gaza. You can't do it. And name another nation that is doing more to urge our Israeli counterparts, to be as cautious and deliberate as they can be in the prosecution of their military operations. You can't. The United States is at the forefront of this. Now, about the.
I mean, why do they need? Why are they suffering in the first place? He says the United States is trying to help them alleviate the suffering of Gaza. They're suffering because of the United States. They're suffering because the United States gives Israel all these weapons. They've given the Israelis 10,000 tons of gear since October 7th. 10,000 tons. I mean, this is like clockwork, 24/7 airlifts, delivering these bunker buster bombs. And by the way, that kind of shows how pathetic they are, because they couldn't crush or defeat or disable a single part of Hamas infrastructure to this day, like 2 months later, with all their military might, which shows how pathetic they are. But I mean, this is really lunacy. It's like the realist. I mean, it's the most dystopian version of like war is peace. This quote from 1984. This is really war is peace in real life. You're seeing that manifested in real life, and it's nuts, because some people turn the TV on, they look at this and they actually believe this horse manure, which is astonishing. And this idea that they're urging the Israelis. You don't have to urge them. Just stop giving them bombs until they learn their lesson. And even then, by the way, this is even if you think the Israelis should be in Gaza, which they have no right to be in Gaza in the first place. So, the Israelis, they love to boast about how how technologically superior they are. how technical and surgical they can be and clinical in their application of, military technology and assassinations and so on. And then they go and do this. Well, this only shows you then that they're doing it on purpose, because if they spend all the time boasting about how, superior they are to everybody, and I don't mean the chosen people stuff. I mean, their military and their Mossad intelligence service, that you can see how they've assassinated people, from Hamas, from Hezbollah in Syria and Damascus, in Dubai, all over the place, in Lebanon. And yes, there are often civilian casualties, but not on this scale. And those assassinations were, of course, illegal, and Israel has no right to do that. But it shows you that when they want to be, they can try to, do it quietly, without bringing down a residential block. But the fact that they are bringing down these residential blocks, it just shows you they don't care, and they don't care because Europeans are allowing them to get away with this. So this shows you that they have learned nothing from 100, 200 years ago. They're still colonizers. They support colonialism. They support genocide. They are complicit in genocide, and they are funding and bankrolling what is happening. So no, the United States is not doing anything. It is actually the prime cause. American Zionists are the root cause of people suffering in Gaza.
Yeah, and there's been upwards of, I believe, 100 shipments, the vast majority of them secret. Most of us don't have any idea how the United States or what is going to Israel, how much is going. But we do have leaks such as this. Biden is pushing for $500 million arms sales to Israel, according to Reuters. It says that it would be worth over $500 million. The potential sale would restock Israel's arsenal of 120 millimeter shells, which is used by its main battle tank. So unnamed sources are talking about this. So this seems to contradict the premise that the United States is doing all that it can to help the civilian population. Those weapons are going to ostensibly murder Palestinians.
Yeah, they are. It's funny though. I said what a waste because the Qassam fighters, like, they release videos on a daily basis of them destroying these tanks, so they're not really gonna benefit much from these tin cans. It's really pathetic. Like the Israelis, they almost never, very very rarely release combat footage. I think I've seen 2 or 3 clips since October 7th, and there's nothing in them. They're like shooting at an empty hallway or something. Whereas Hamas, every single day, they're posting these GoPro videos of them destroying one Israeli tank, another armored vehicle. They take them out by the dozen every day. And the Israelis are trying to hide the number of casualties. They reported 5,000 wounded in Enet or Ynet, which is an Israeli outlet. And then they had to bring it down to 2,000 because Israel have something called a military censor, which is a British law. It's not Israeli. It's still a British colonial law that they apply, just like administrative detention, where the army can censor the entire press corps and just have them retract something or have them put a lid on it, which again, it's another aspect of how colonial Israel is. It's literally applying British laws from the Mandate times, right, from the emergency regulations, which were created to put down an Arab revolt for independence. So it's just a continuation of this.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could comment on, because on the one hand, Israel is massacring Palestinians, and on the other, I saw a mutual friend, Scott Ritter, reply to a tweet of, and I would play it, but of course, if you play any kind of battlefield scenes on YouTube, you're liable for pretty severe punishment. But to just outline it, it was IDF or IOF soldiers raiding an empty school in Gaza and essentially looking like they were shooting at a wall.
Right.
And Scott had something to say of the sort. Well, if you think these are skilled troops, I'll just let this speak for itself. Talk about the battlefield situation, because as you said earlier, there's this so-called aim, which isn't really the aim at all, but it is the stated aim to destroy Hamas. But on the other hand, that doesn't look like it's going too well. So what? You can kill a lot of people, but it doesn't mean that you're winning a war. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, we should look at the statements the Israelis made, because the defense minister he called Palestinians human animals, and this is not like it's not some random term that he came up with. It's a very very specific term, and it translates to goyim, right, which is a term that comes from the Talmud. So Talmud is very different from the Israeli stated claim that they're the Jewish state and they follow the Old Testament. This is not the Old Testament. This is a different book. It's a very extremist book, and they have, instead, like the Bible will say, "Thou shalt not kill." The Talmud says, "Rise and kill first," right? And it has this term about human animals, that everybody who is not Jewish is a human animal and should be killed. And so this is what Israel believes in, right? And it's not like this image that they give off about, oh, we are just like the people from the Old Testament returning there. First of all, they don't come from there. They're Ukrainians, they're Eastern Europeans, and they don't follow what the Bible says. So just to put that issue to bed. And the other thing is that when they're going in there and they're killing all these people, it's because they want to kill all these people, but these are not military objectives. You can't destroy 28 of the 36 hospitals in Gaza and then say that this is an achievement. It's not an achievement because these are just hospitals. There's nothing going on in there. So they lied about these tunnels under Al Shifa Hospital, and then they put out this pathetic propaganda with the lists that show literally nothing except the days of the week in Arabic. But they assume that people in the West, they're ignorant, and they insult your intelligence by just showing you something in Arabic, and they know that there's Islamophobia in the West, so they just use that to spread further lies, thinking no one's going to look at what they're pointing at and translate it, and it's just like Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. So this shows you that they're after the infrastructure of Gaza. They're after the hospitals, the schools, and everybody and anyone who is not a Zionist or in their Zionist interests. And then, of course, militarily, I mean, what is the single objective that Israel has achieved so far? You can't name one, because they said they want to destroy Hamas, but Hamas is still there. Not only is Hamas still functioning, Israel have failed to disable them in any way. As a matter of fact, as I was saying earlier with the footage, every day we have footage of them, humiliating the Israelis. Like it's not just they're taking out a few tanks. They're running up behind them and planting IEDs and then using RPGs and taking out after taking out the trophy system. It's so humiliating. The Israelis, they wanted to sell some of their tanks to Ukraine. They like to pride themselves as like military geniuses. They're pathetic. And one of their main doctrines, Al-Dahya doctrine, which is named after a district in Beirut in Lebanon, which Israel flattened in 2006. This was created by the former head of the Israeli army, and he just lost his nephew and his son in Gaza, which, I mean, I can only describe as karma, because there are countless fathers and uncles in Lebanon, in Syria, and Palestine who have lost their nephews and their children because of him. His doctrine is literally just about flattening civilian infrastructure, causing disproportionate loss among civilians. That's it. There's no military objective. So this guy is a war criminal. I mean, to put it mildly, which is an understatement. He is a butcher, and the thing is that the Israelis are suffering not only on the Gaza front, they're suffering in the north because they're having Hezbollah destroy their radar, electronic warfare systems, these towers that they put up, which again, this is another occupation in Sheba Farms. And they've basically caused the Israelis to become blind up there. And because the Israelis are so afraid that Hezbollah is going to, humiliate them like in 2006, they have evacuated 70,000 Israeli settlers. Think about this. You've had these people that have come from all over the world thinking they're going to go to Palestine or Lebanon and or Syria and live there like it's a summer beach house or something. And now they're getting a taste of their own medicine. They're the ones that have to evacuate and leave their homes. And even then, it's not really the same, because Gazans have to sleep in the rain in the cold outside, and Israelis are just being put in hotels. So you can't compare that, but it's a tiny bit of their own medicine. And it shows you how afraid the Israelis are. They've had to basically stretch their forces thin because of Hezbollah and send them up north. Then you have to remember that the Israelis are also being hit from the Golan Heights from Syria. They're also being hit in the Red Sea. So there's this very tiny strait, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, that is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, because it brings you into the Red Sea. And, I mean, there are literally tens of thousands of fuel ships that pass through here. A lot of Chinese merchandise coming through here into Europe, into the West, because it doesn't even make sense to go around Africa. The whole point of the Suez Canal was that you cut shipping times and costs. But to get to the Suez Canal from the east, you have to go through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is Yemen's turf. And so the Israelis, they've had multiple ships, diverting course being hit, catching fire, or being straight up seized, like Galaxy Leader, which was the first one. And just today, the Yemeni said they don't care what nationality the ship is, what flag it's flying, what the people on board, what nationality they are. If this ship is delivering anything to the Israelis or benefiting them in any way, they're going to seize it and stop it as long as Israel is bombing Gaza and preventing aid from coming in. So you have multiple fronts of warfare that are really bad for the Israelis. They're really being humiliated, and they never talk about this. I mean, just think about this: that Israel is being hit by the Yemenis, by the Lebanese, and they never ever bring this up because it's so humiliating. The other thing is that in Iraq and Syria, the U.S. have bases there that are being hit almost on a daily basis by the resistance in Iraq and in Syria. So the Hashr al-Sha'bi, which is PMU, Popular Mobilization Units, and of course you have other resistance groups that work with the Syrian government. So this also negatively impacts the United States and Israel, because the United States is the one that is supplying Israel. So they're going to get, as long as they help Israel to carry out this genocide, they're going to get punished in Iraq and Syria. And honestly, I mean, those bases have no business being there anyway. They're illegal and they're stealing oil. In Iraq, after the U.S. assassinated Soleimani, they said, get the hell out of the country. They voted on this in the parliament. And this is funny because the whole point that they claimed that they said was the basis of invading Iraq, it wasn't just like weapons of mass destruction. They said they want to bring democracy. Okay, Iraq has a democracy now. They voted on kicking out the Americans, and they don't listen. They don't care. So that's a funny thing. But these occupation forces, whether they're in Lebanon, whether they're in Syria, whether they're in Palestine or Iraq, they are being hit, and they are bleeding, and they are taking damage. And I should add one thing, that Israel has a base in Eritrea on this island called Dahlak, and the Yemenis hit that too. And Yemen is sending cruise missiles and drones, which no one would have even thought of. I mean, 2 years ago when they hit the United Arab Emirates, which was very far away, we're talking 1,000, 2,000 kilometers, that was already impressive. And this is one of the reasons why the GCC cut the war on Yemen, because they saw that, this is coming to our doorstep now, and we can't defeat them. So another impressive feat the Yemenis executed was to fire these cruise missiles and drones all the way at Eilat, which is this port city in occupied Palestine. So many surprises that they didn't expect. And this is not just a war that's happening in Gaza. It's a war that's taking place on multiple fronts, and that is really bad news for the Israelis and Americans, because they cannot sustain it.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.